Hello, not so party people. First live YouTube in a long time. And meanwhile, I regretted doing it after I said I was going to do it, but I'm still going to do it because whatever. I am set up in my living room, not in my office because I am alone in the house and I've been out here and I didn't want to move. So it's a nicer view anyway. So there you go. All right, well, let's talk. So I did 2 YouTubes this morning, one after the press release came out, and I did one after the conference call. And I just finished listening to the conference call for a second time. And I am extraordinarily confident that Pfizer and Arvinas are going to commercialize this in second-line monotherapy. If that's your sole risk, if your risk is that Arvinas is not getting the truth from Pfizer, and Pfizer is going to walk from the commercialization, I think that risk is de minimis. Okay. In fact, on 56 minutes into the call, they were asked about that. And he said, all the interactions we've had with Pfizer are full blast. The joint teams are laying out significant plans, global and the US. There's been no change in the game plan with Pfizer. The only thing that happened was they've decided that this probably won't work in first-line combo based on the fact that wild type failed in this trial. What we're going to find out, okay, at ASCO at the end of this month is pretty simple to me. We're going to find out that the HR in mutant is much better than 0.60, and the HR in wild type is much worse than 1.0. And as a result, it makes no sense to be doing combo trials in first line when 95% of those patients are non-mutant, okay? And these are very, very expensive trials. So then you have to ask yourself the question, what is the market opportunity in second line plus in just mutant? And I can't tell you that number, but it's certainly north of 500 million a year in sales and probably more like $1 billion peak sales, okay? It's a very big market. If that's the case, and if Pfizer can commercialize this on their own with their own sales force, since they already do breast oncology sales, what is Arvinas's half worth to Pfizer now that there is no real R&D happening? Okay, R&D is basically seized. There's still 3 phase 1, phase 2 combo trials that are probably not enrolling that they can just wait to see what that data matures with. But the trial they announced this morning is a Pfizer-run trial, and they're just going to add an arm with Vepdeg in that combo, which, by the way, if Pfizer was planning on walking and dropping from this drug, why would they be putting in a new trial with a combo to test it out, right? They would be done with it completely. So it makes no sense why Pfizer would commercialize this if it was negative NPV to Pfizer, okay? You can argue it might be negative NPV to Arvinas if they were doing it on their own, because they're just doing it to try to prove the point of having a public company. But Pfizer has no reason to go along for show. So if this is a positive NPV for Pfizer and a positive NPV for Arvinas, what is it worth? Okay. I can't tell you the exact number, but it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you listen to the call again, the most important part of the entire call happened at 27 minutes and 45 seconds, okay? And they were asked about what the commercial opportunity will cost Arvinas and how they're thinking about the sales force and whatever. And they end it with this line. We also have the ability to have ongoing discussions with Pfizer about the best way to take it forward, and we will update you on all that as we complete those discussions. Didn't say as we start the discussions or if we start the discussions. And I'll tell you why. It makes no sense for Arvinas to be co-commercializing this anymore. Okay. It's not a $5 billion opportunity. Okay. It's probably 500 million to $1 billion. And there's no reason to be sharing a brand new sales force when Pfizer can just drop it into their sales force. So if that's the case, what does it work to Arvinas? My guess is you only have 2 options here. Okay. Oh, by the way, and they also refuse to tell us what the milestone Pfizer's on the hook for the first approval. Okay. It's certainly north of $100 million. We don't know what the number is, though. Okay. Why won't they tell us that? They're not telling us that because they're going to restructure the partnership and they're not going to get that milestone anymore. Okay. And that'll also make it more attractive for Pfizer to go forward with the commercialization. So how will they restructure the partnership? Who knows? There's only two options. One is they take in more money up front and they get a royalty, or there's three options. More money up front and a royalty. The second one is they sell the drug completely to Pfizer for a fixed amount of money. And the third is they just get a royalty in the future. Okay. Which one of those three they do, I have no idea. They have enough money now to the second half of 2028, so they don't really need more upfront money, right? So they might prefer to have a 20% royalty and let Pfizer do all the commercializing. Whichever one of those three paths they do, it's clearly worth something to Arvinas, particularly if they no longer have any cost associated with it, okay? It'll turn into basically the Novartis partnership, but significantly with an already positive phase 3 and about to be commercialized drug. What is that worth? I think that's worth at least $500 million to Arvinas, which is $7 a share. Okay. That would assume something like 1 to 2 times peak sales to Pfizer, which is pretty low, right? Sometimes these things go for 4 to 5 times peak sales. So 1 to 2 times peak sales, 500 million to Arvinas, gets you $7 a share. Okay. You're currently trading with $12.25 of cash, burning whatever it is, $1 a quarter. Those two things combined get you to $19 to $20 a share. It's trading at $7 right now. You have two other gigantic buckets of value here. The Novartis partnership brought in $150 million of cash last year, and Novartis fully funds all those trials going forward. They have not launched any new trials yet, but Novartis just partnered with them in April of last year. So there's nothing to believe that the phase 1, phase 2 trial in prostate has shown something negative to make them have walked from their plans of going forward there. They just bought the asset. I think that's worth at least $250 million, which would be another $3 a share. And then finally, they have 3 phase 1 drugs. 2 of them are currently in the clinic, the neuro drug, and then their drug in the other cancer drug in it's escaping me what the hold on. ARV-393 in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And those 2 things are going to read out data this year and next year. And they should be proof of efficacy, proof of concept in those readouts. Because in the neuro drug, they're going to be testing it in Parkinson's patients. So we will get some efficacy signal sometime in 2026 there. Okay. With ARV-393, again, that's being tested in actual sick patients, not healthy volunteers. We should get some sort of signal in 2026 there. Okay. And then finally, they announced that their CRAS is, whatever the hell that is just got clearance to begin testing in the second half of this year. Yes, you have to believe all of those drugs are not negative NPV, just neutral NPV. Okay. If you believe they're neutral NPV, you get to a $20 share value today versus $7. How do you lose? You lose really just one way. You lose if Pfizer walks from the program and they say they're going to commercialize on their own. And then you have to believe it's very negative NPV, right? And if it's that negative NPV, they're just going to burn all the cash to the ground and the company's a zero. Okay. And I think the odds of that are virtually nothing. Okay. The most important thing that happened in this conference call that I think is being missed mostly by the street is, for the first time since they reported the data, they said that based on the VERITAC-2 data, that they believe they have high conviction they are best in class in mutant in second line and above. That's at 3 minutes and 15 seconds of the conference call. High conviction, best in class data based on VERITAC-2 data. Okay. At 9 minutes and 20 seconds, the CMO says, we believe vepdeg has a best in class profile. And at 26 minutes and 30 seconds, the CEO says, positioning, as Noah said, that's the CMO, you'll see the data at ASCO, best in class of the degraders, great confidence assuming approval. Okay. What is best in class? It's a mixture of efficacy, of course, and safety. Okay. If they truly do have the best in class data, even if it's just by a few months in PFS and a better safety profile, this is just a pill versus the other pills. It should capture a majority of the market share. Remember, people are being diagnosed with this regularly on an annual basis. They're very sick patients. This isn't like BridgeBio's drug where you take it for a decade and switching is more difficult once you're on an established drug. There's tons of new patients every year here. Okay. Unfortunately, it's mostly new patients. So my path here is very simple. Okay. We have ASCO data in a month. Okay. I believe with high conviction, you're going to see good data at ASCO. You're going to see best in class efficacy and safety, and the stock is going to go up on that news. You're going to see a bad HR in wild type, and that is the reason why they're not going forward in the combos in phase one, in a first line combo and second line combo. Okay. Because they don't think it works. Pfizer doesn't think it works in wild type. If that doesn't matter what the HR is in wild type, if they're not commercializing or going forward or spending money there, right? All that matters is what the HR is in mutant. And I think people will be enthused by what they see at that ASCO presentation. And that's also the reason why it got a late-breaking oral slot in the biggest hall. Okay. And it's being featured in the best of ASCO, whatever the hell that is, in July. Okay. So you have a $7 stock with $12.25 in cash. Okay. You have a partnership with Novartis that has to be worth more than zero. There's no cost associated with it. So Novartis shoulders all the costs and all the trials. And if any of it works, Arvinas has an NPV of well over $1 billion there. Okay. What's that worth today? I did 250 million. Okay. On the Pfizer side, I believe strongly they will restructure that partnership, and they'll restructure it in the short term. They'll probably do it after ASCO. I would think within 2 months after ASCO. What does the stock do then? If they say that they either sell all of vepdeg to Pfizer, or they get some upfront and they get a royalty. At that point, Pfizer is going to be commercializing it because they just restructured the partnership and they're giving them money for it. Okay. So there'll be complete confidence that Arvinas won't go it alone, and they're going to get all sorts of money. So you might be looking at a company with another $200, $100, $500 million in cash, depending on whether they sell the drug outright or they get royalties in the future. And then you have this promising, albeit very early, 3 phase 1 assets with a leaner company. Everybody says that this technology works, and it proves it works based on they scored in this phase 3 trial, albeit not in wild type. What's that worth? Is it worth cash? In the old days, if this was a pre-IPO company, they wouldn't be doing around at cash. Okay. It'd be much above cash. So at any moment you could have a value creating event here, right? Especially if they sell vepdeg. If they sell vepdeg to Pfizer or restructure it, maybe you'll have somebody that's interested in this platform. And it is indeed a platform specifically based on this technology, this degrading technology that could fit into a larger company. Do I think Pfizer will buy the whole company? It's possible, but Pfizer doesn't do neuro anymore. And one of their 3 phase 1 assets is neuro. Could they unload that? Of course they could. I mean, it's being valued at 0. It's being valued at negative right now, right? So it seems to me you could wake up to Pfizer buying the whole company at $20 or $25 a share. Is that likely? No, it's not likely. It's much more likely they would restructure vepdeg. And unfortunately, Arvinas isn't in a position of strength there, but they don't need a lot, right? If they just give up the milestone for approval, and maybe they move that milestone to an upfront. So it's really the same thing for Pfizer. And so they take in $150 million, and they get a high double-digit, royalty going forward, which could be worth, 100, 150 million a year in the out years. That's worth a 500 million NPV, the 150 million plus the royalty. Again, $7 a share in value, where it's trading right now. So, I'm pretty enthused by it. Am I more bullish today at 7 compared to yesterday at 9? I'm disappointed they're not doing the combo trials. I thought if they were going to do the combo trials, then Pfizer would have a strategic need to buy vepdeg out or buy Arvinas out, because of the multi-billion-dollar blockbuster potential for vepdeg. So I'm definitely not more bullish today than I was yesterday. However, I think my risk is much lower now. Okay. The bad event happened. The bad event is they are not going to run this in other phase 3 trials where this could be worth billions of dollars. Okay. All that's left in my mind going forward is positive news. They've already met with the FDA regarding the pre-NDA meeting. They are going to file an NDA here, and the data is going to be good at ASCO. Okay. They didn't tell us May 1st, best in class, and then put data out 4 weeks from now that's not best in class. I'm not saying it's going to be, leaps and bounds above what the other cert is showing, but I think it will probably, in the past, they've said 2 to 3 months PFS over standard of care would be clinically meaningful. My guess is it's above the 3 months. Okay. The safety will also be superior, is my guess, consistent with the previous studies. So I wouldn't say that I'm more bullish. I would say that my risk profile here at 7 versus 950 yesterday is different. And also the stock is now back down to where it was when the market was at its lows a month ago, right? XBI is up, 20% or 15% from the lows, and ARVN is back to basically the lows. And I think it's an overreaction. And I think that once you get clarity on what the data looks like, what the market opportunity could be, I mean, even if it's only a $400 or $500 million market opportunity, what is that worth to Pfizer to clean up the partnership, right? It's got to be worth at least a few $100 million to Arvinas. So if you even assume it's only worth $3 or $4 to Arvinas, right? The stock's worth a lot more than where it's trading today, right? Use $3 for that. Use $3 for Novartis. That's 6. 6 on the 12 is 18. 18 versus 7. And again, that's assuming the rest of the pipeline is neutral NPV, which it should be positive NPV. I mean, at some level, if they have any intellectual honesty about, going forward with those trials and with the company, your problem here is that the board owns no stock. The CEO owns a lot of stock, and that's really where it ends. It's my belief that ECOR1 is gone. They exercise their options if you look at the proxy. And I believe through a contact, I think that they've sold their whole position, which we'll probably find out next month. They wouldn't have exercised their options if they didn't sell their position out, because they can't exercise their pre-funded warrants to go over 9.9%. They probably sold the whole position because the ECAR1 managing partner was former Pfizer, and he knew after they didn't hit in wild type that they weren't going to go forward in the combo trials. And that removes kind of a blue sky scenario here where this is worth $50, $60, $80 a share. And they're a biotech, fund. And they're not a special situation fund trying to scrape, shit off the sidewalk, which is, what I do. So you don't have that controlled shareholder base anymore. You don't have a great board. And, that would be your risk. The cash burn is way lower now. Okay. You have multiple readouts over the next year and a half. They will not do a capital raise in 2026 unless the stock is much higher, because they have cash to the second half of 2028. And they might have even more cash after they restructure the Pfizer partnership. So you have a very long path here to show value. And there's a good chance that this platform and the concept of a degrader is worth $1 billion to a pharma company just to have this R&D machine and this platform inside their company. So even if all those phase 1 trials don't show great promise, you might be able to sell the company anyway at the end of the rainbow to a pharmaceutical company. So I think the setup is really, really good. I would think that I honestly would think fair value today is probably at cash. $12, $13 a share is where it should be trading. I could see why it wouldn't be at 20 based on, the general malaise of biotech and of the underlying risks here. But, it's been de-risked. The trial has read out. Okay. The only thing left is to know what best in class means. And are they, hyping up the words best in class when they're kind of fibbing to it, right? Maybe it's similar efficacy, but better safety. That is best in class. I mean, it would still be best in class, and it would still have a significant market share. So, I go back to kind of my Bridge Bio thing. You have two drugs. One's better than the other. They're the same mechanism of action, a pill. Which one are you going to take? Which one are you going to prescribe if you're an oncologist? I would think if it's pretty clear cut that this has better safety and similar efficacy, let alone better efficacy and better safety. That's funny. You'd prescribe this one. But again, I'm not an oncologist. I'm not a specialist. I'm just looking at this from a rational standpoint that Pfizer has no need to bullshit us, and they have no need to go forward with this. Now, yeah, I'm disappointed that 2 days ago Pfizer said they were excited by the phase 1 combo data that they're generating. I don't know why they'd be excited about that if they're not going forward with it. But just because they decide they're not going forward with it now doesn't mean they don't have to go forward in the future. And by the way, if you want to be really cynical, maybe Pfizer is planning on buying Arvinas or buying all of the Vepdeg. And if they're going to buy all of Vepdeg, they want to have the least sexy opportunity to Arvinas at that time, right? So that they're in the best position to negotiate a good restructuring of the partnership, right? If you're Pfizer, how do you win by telling Arvinas, yeah, we want to move forward in these two really costly trials. This could be worth billions. We want to buy you out. What do you think? You're more likely to do that in 2026 after you've repositioned yourself and you own the whole drug. So they're very expensive trials. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars each to run it. So I could see why Pfizer's not going forward there. It makes sense to me, unfortunately. My biggest issue here always, and you can ask Andrew this, I said it to him many times, is if it didn't hit an ITT, but it hit in mutant, and this is the reason why the stock went to $8 in the first place, it means the HR in wild type has to be terrible. The better it is in mutant, the worse it has to be in wild type, or else the overall HR hits. That's just how it works, okay? And this is what everyone was worried about, and that's why it went to $8. So we almost kind of knew this already. I was just hopeful that the HR in wild type was around 1 or maybe 0.95 or something. And then the HR in mutant was whatever, 0.55. And those two things together thread the needle to where they would go forward in combo, hoping that the combo helps it in wild type more than that 0.95 because it's a mix of two drugs. It wasn't the case, okay? But it's really funny to me because I talked to a guy before they had their top line release back in March, and he thought if the drug failed completely, total failure, the stock would have held 10, 11, 12. Like it was his belief that the pipeline and the platform had a positive EV outside of Vepdeg. So here we are at 7 with an almost certain commercial opportunity, right? They know the data. They've talked about the FDA. They've talked about it with Pfizer. There's no new data that's going to emerge from this trial outside of overall survival maturing that would lead them to change their mind here, and that's incredibly unlikely to change the path. So I don't know. Spoken like a true bag holder. I mean, I started pitching this thing at 820 and it's 7. I've lost a lot of money on it because I have a lot of options. So don't get me wrong. It's been a big loser for me. But today I tripled my common position. It's a 30% common position. And I bought a ton of October 750 calls and 750, 1250 call spreads. I mean, the OX 750, 1250s are trading right now. I just bought some at $1.05. And you get to a 1250 stock in pretty much the base case outcome, I think, which is good OSCO data, and they reposition themselves with Pfizer. You would at least get to a $10 stock, which means those are worth 2.5x versus the 105 or 1. You might also get some other data in their other programs, so I'm not counting on that. And then look, people can bid for the company anytime. These things just happen. If it stays negative EV for so long, maybe someone will lob in an $18 offer, and maybe they'll have to take it. because it's so far above where it's trading. So anyway, any questions? Damn, Matt, you were so smart. Wish I had a critical thinking ability. I mean, I'm down 27% today in my biggest position. So I don't feel that smart. I do feel good that it's 695 when I was buying it hand over fist in the pre-market. Because I felt pretty stupid as it was breaking $6 and I was getting hit on bids over and over again. My average purchase price today is 652. So I feel good there. And I still feel really, really good about where that's going to end up after ASCO. I think you probably could shake out in the 8s, maybe even in the 9s, based on what that data says. And with Pfizer reiterating that they are going to commercialize, because the next step is Pfizer. Pfizer's going to comment and say whether they're going to commercialize or not. Andrew, you didn't answer my phone call. My first thought was he's not doing another YouTube right now, is he? Sure enough. Why not take the cash in CVR, push for a liquidation? This isn't really a liquidation story, right? I mean, they're burning $1 a quarter. Okay, this isn't KROS where they have 10 years of cash. And the difference between this and KROS is that people think the phase 1 assets have value, right? Obviously, they don't think it has value right now because you're showing negative EV. But the KROS phase 1 assets do not have value, okay? And the platform at KROS definitely has no value. So there's no machine that's worth anything at KROS. I believe strongly the degrading platform here has a lot of value. Everything I've read about on Bio Twitter says it does. And this company has been doing this for a very long time. Oh, by the way, I left out they have a partnership with Bayer where they're doing agricultural stuff. And Bayer's funding it all. And that's still going on. That hasn't stopped it either. What's that worth? $1, $2 a share? I don't know. That exists. Okay. Another partnership. So I don't think this is a liquidation story. I think this is Vepdeg has value. I think the platform has value. And I think the phase 1 assets have value. And the Novartis drugs has value. So the company is very smart with the layoffs today. It's a much leaner organization now. Okay. When they tell the market they're not going to commercialize Vepdeg, you then have that risk taken off. That costs are going to bloat up, right? You're going to stay a lean, mean R&D machine. They even said that they're going to partner in neuro after they have proof of concept. So there'll be no big neuro trials, right? What's that worth? If they show proof of concept in Parkinson's, which is, not likely, but is it a 10%, a 20%, 25% chance? I don't know. But if they show proof of concept in Parkinson's and then they partner Parkinson's, again, that's like $1 billion NPV, which is worth 3x what it's trading. Easy $1 billion NPV with proof of concept in Parkinson's. So it's going to do what it's going to do. I really like it. Again, I'm a nobody. I'm a generalist. I'm not a smart specialist, but I aggregate my information from specialists and from what I read. And selling today seems like the very stupid thing to do. Today is a buying day, in my opinion. And I have no problem blowing out of positions. I say this over and over again on here, right? I sold out all of my Target Hospitality. I've currently sold out all of my Magna chip. I've never disclosed that yet. I took all my tax losses on Magna chip. I think that Magna chip is cheap at $3, and I think it could be $3, indefinitely. And I want to move on. I took the tax losses, and I like other ideas better. I rode that thing from 25 to 3 and bought all the way down, and I've now sold. So my biggest loser of all time, both percentage-wise and dollar-wise. And it hurts. But I couldn't have gotten that one more wrong. I mean, it's not even possible. The Chinese were going to buy their lead asset, OLED, for over $1 billion, and they now are liquidating it for no money. It went from antitrust, CFIUS, not antitrust, $1 billion product with multiple Chinese people wanting to buy it to literally worth zero, liquidated, to wind down. That's incredible. So the U.S. government obviously really fucked up there. I'm sure the Koreans I'm sure they're so happy they kept their jobs, right? Those jobs are all gone now because they're liquidating it. So it's very painful to me. I would have lost. The amount of money is so staggering, the amount of money I lost, not just from the deal not going through, but the amount of money I added to it all the way down. But look, I'm still here, and my portfolio is still at good, AUM levels. So somehow I manage these big positions and these blowups. And I figure it out, and I'll figure this one out. So what's your downside here? Let's talk that out. So let's say we get to ASCO, and the ASCO data is not best in class, but it's a me too. It's the same as the other drugs, okay? What happens then? Well, Pfizer knows this data already. So you then have to have Pfizer then say, Arvinas is lying, and Pfizer does not commercialize, okay? If Pfizer doesn't commercialize, and then Arvinas says what? We think this is best in class, even though Pfizer doesn't, we're going to commercialize this. It's just not happening, okay? If that happens, the stock probably is a zero, okay? I don't even put a 1% odds of that happening, okay? But let's say I'm wrong and they both decide not to commercialize. That Vepdeg, they make a 180 from this call today, and Vepdeg is a zero. We should know that by the end of the summer, okay? If we get to the end of the summer and they have $10 in cash, Vepdeg's is zero, and they kill it. It's all done. You have $10 in cash, the Novartis partnership, and you have the 3 phase 1 assets. Does it go to $5? I mean, it could. It really could. So you have 2 down in that scenario, which I would say that's a pretty good buy there, right? $5 for $10 in cash, a Novartis partnership, that Bayer partnership, and 3 phase 1 assets that are closer to reading out potential blockbuster proof of concepts. I don't know. Wouldn't you buy that at $5? I would. So that to me seems like it's a draconian move to $5. So maybe it's more like $6. That's $1 down. So if your risk is $1 down, and God knows how much up, if they get bought out completely, if they sell Vepdeg, if they restructure Vepdeg, that's a good setup, right? Maybe the CEO would be good with the $20 buyout, and that seems fine for Pfizer too. I don't know if the company would sell for $20. At $20, that today is a $500 million enterprise value. 72 million shares, $7. 7 times 7 is $490. Call it $600 million enterprise value. I'm not so sure the board of Arvinas thinks that their platform and their 3 phase 1 assets and their Novartis partnership and Vepdeg is not worth more than $600 million, even though it's trading at a negative, whatever, $300 million enterprise value. So I'm not so sure the board would sell for $20. That I think is the value disconnect where it's trading right now, and what it's worth. Lead us to the end of the rainbow, Matt. Man, should I cue Dorothy? Worst case scenario. I already answered it. That to me is the worst case scenario. Okay. The worst case scenario is that Pfizer walks, the drug shit, and they commercialize it on their own. And all the phase 1 assets fail. All 3 phase 1 assets fail. Zero. The stock's a zero. Okay. In the medium term, if they commercialize it on their own and Pfizer walks, stock goes to 4 to 5. They're just not going to do that. What's ballpark cost to commercial something like this from scratch for a company like ARVN? It's a great question, Roger. The answer is a lot. Okay. They might talk about in the conference call how it would be targeted to whatever the top, I think they said 6,000 oncologists. I think they said that. It might have been 600. I'm not sure. There wouldn't be a profitable drug until year 2 or year 3 of the launch. And it would be expensive for them to commercialize themselves. And by the way, note, they said worldwide commercialization, okay? They didn't say just the US. They can't commercialize this overseas. Pfizer was originally responsible for all overseas commercializations anyway. Again, all signs point to them having a good relationship with Pfizer and Pfizer being on board with this plan. Pfizer killing the combo trials does not mean they don't think Vepdeg works in mono, okay? They laid out a pretty good reason why they killed it in combo trials. It doesn't work in wild type. How about the oral SERD from AZ or Osurdo? Has that read out yet, Brian? I guess we have to see what the results are there. But it's going to be competitive, right? I think it's a pretty crowded area. And I think that's the reason why the market doesn't give it any value. And I think Arvinas knows this. So they'll restructure the deal. Pfizer will drop this into their pipeline, into their sales channel. And whatever it does, if the drug ends up only doing $300 or $400 million of sales, it'll do something and it'll be worth something to Pfizer. Even in that scenario, it should be worth $400 or $500 million to Arvinas. You know, shouldn't it? And the optionality for whatever the combo trials show. This new phase 1 trial they're running, more mature data, you know, in the field with other phase 1 trials, with other combo trials. All they decided was today they're not going to run expensive phase 3 trials. That could always change, right? They always will have that optionality. So anyway, I think I made myself pretty clear here. I think I'm approaching it. Oh, that hurt. From a pretty sober perspective. And yeah, you know, I think the stock should be in the mid 8s to 9 right now, mid 8s to mid 9s. And then, you know, approaching that $12, $13 level when Pfizer restructures the partnership. Positive ASCO data and a Pfizer restructuring gets you to somewhere in the $10 to $15 ballpark versus 7. So it's 3 to 8 up and 1 to 2 down. And I think it's like a 90% chance it's up now that you've had this gigantic punch in the face that they're not doing the combo trials. All right. Sorry about the losses. I'm down 11% today. But honestly, it doesn't feel that bad because I still think we have a good shot here. I don't feel defeated like a broken process or something. I feel pretty good about it. All right. Take care, guys. Thanks so much for joining. Appreciate it.